Okay, so first of all, let's look at what they tell us in the problem. So they tell us that the table here gives us the maximum number of pastries you can make, or the Northland and West Coast. So they're two different areas, and we're told the maximum number of pastries they can make if they don't make any sandwiches, and we're told the maximum number of sandwiches they can make if they don't make any pastries. And then, of course, there's a trade-off because I'm assuming they're using a certain number of ovens, and so if you have pastries in an oven, you can't have sandwiches there. So you can imagine there's a trade-off. You can make one or the other, but not necessarily both all the time. So, for example, in the Northland, if they choose to make no sandwiches at all, they can make 80,000 pastries. And similarly, if they choose to make no pastries at all, they can make 20,000 sandwiches. So that's what the table's telling us here. So the next step here is to look at opportunity cost, which you've already done some opportunity cost things in some other homeworks. And what the point here with opportunity cost is, what are you giving up in order to get something else? So if they could make 80,000 pastries if they don't make any sandwiches, but they could make 20,000 sandwiches if they don't make any pastries, then the opportunity cost of making one pastry for them is how many sandwiches did they have to give up to make that pastry? Does that make sense? So it's really just a matter of doing a division here. So the opportunity cost for producing one pastry is a fourth of a sandwich, because you can see that to get from 0 pastries to 80,000 pastries, they have to give up all these 20,000 sandwiches. Does that make sense? So if they're making 0 pastries, they can make 20,000 sandwiches. But if they want to make 80,000 pastries, they can make 0 sandwiches. So that's what the table tells us here, and that gives us what our opportunity cost is. In order to make 80,000 pastries, they had to give up those 20,000 sandwiches. So if we want to talk about the opportunity cost of making just one pastry, then we just divide there. So they gave up 20,000 sandwiches to make 80,000 pastries, so you divide 20,000 divided by 80,000, and you get 0.25 or 1/4. And that's how many sandwiches they give up for each pastry that they make. Okay, so that's opportunity cost. You've already done that in other homeworks, so hopefully that makes sense. And they do that. They tell you that in the problem. The opportunity cost for a pastry in Northland is 0.25 sandwiches. Opportunity cost of one sandwich is 4 pastries. It's just a matter of which way you look at it. So you can do 80,000 divided by 20,000, and that gives you the opportunity cost of one sandwich. So that's four pastries. And then they do the same thing in the West Coast. So you look at this other column of the table here, and you find the opportunity costs for the West Coast. Now, what this question's actually asking about is the comparative advantage. And comparative advantage just means who has the advantage in this market. So for whom does it cost less to make a pastry? So that's all you're looking for here when you talk about comparative advantage. So the comparative advantage in producing pastries just means who had to give up fewer sandwiches to make a pastry. Does that make sense? So I have an advantage if it costs me less to make a pastry. I have an advantage if I'm giving up fewer sandwiches in order to make a pastry. So in this case, the Northland has the advantage in producing pastries. Why? How do I know? Because the opportunity cost of producing one pastry in the Northland is okay, so the top one here, the opportunity cost of producing one pastry in the Northland is 0.25 sandwiches. So the Northland gives up a fourth of a sandwich every time they make a pastry. The West Coast, on the other hand, their opportunity cost of producing a pastry is 0.5 sandwiches. So in the West Coast, they have to give up half a sandwich to make one pastry. So who has the advantage? The Northland, the people who only give up a fourth of a sandwich for each pastry. because they're giving up less to make a pastry. Does that make sense? So their cost of pastry is lower, which means they have an advantage in pastry making. On the other hand, the West Coast has the advantage for producing sandwiches because the cost for the West Coast of producing one sandwich is only 2 pastries, where the Northland has to give up 4 pastries to make one sandwich. So the sandwiches are cheaper, in a sense, for the West Coast than they are for the Northland, because the West Coast gives up fewer sandwiches to make or fewer pastries to make a sandwich. Does that make sense? Hopefully that helps. If not, feel free to ask again, and we'll try to go through it again.